everyone. Welcome to another edition of ARG Presents. I'm your good buddy Amigo Aaron, joined this week by a man who's not only a master planner, but a Technicolor nightmare. I give you the Brit.
They call me Mr. Peanut. I'm such a good planner.
They call you something like that. So, if you joined us last week, we spun the wheel, we made a deal. But before we go into this fine deal, our good buddy the Brit has some important information on our ongoing contest to win a brand new boxed Dragon's Lair. Britt, tell them the scoop.
No, they're not winning a brand new drop box Dragon Slayer. They have a chance to win a brand new box Dragon Slayer Mini.
Close enough. Close enough.
Those are very different things. Holy cow. Trying to get us killed, Aaron. The contest, we're giving away 3 prizes. We're giving away an ARG lanyard, probably the top prize considered by most. A New Wave quarter slot keychain, and the big prize, a Dragon Slayer Mini, also from New Wave. We're just doing this to give back to the fans and to gather these possibilities, these names of hopefuls. We have been issuing forth different challenges throughout the weeks. And this week was the Twitter follower and Twitch chat participants. And we have from Twitter, Frodo NL.
Oh, I know him.
And from Twitch chat, we rolled the big old max number and got us a few Z9K9.
Are you kidding me?
I am not. Well, technically, the first time we rolled on Twitch chat, we got me. So I didn't think I was eligible. So I went ahead and rolled her again, and we got some Z9K9.
Very good. So the 2 winners this week, once again, Frodo NL and Z9K9.
And what that means is they will be placed onto the prize wheel of power once we fill it up with 12 big old names. Give it a spin, and we will be counting down the prizes. But more on that once we get the names all figured out.
How many names do we have on the prize wheel of power?
We are currently at 5, and we will be taking 3 names in the coming week.
Okay.
3. Find out at the end of the show how to qualify.
Very cunning. I like what you did there. So, on to the important business at hand. Last week, we did, in fact, spin the wheel. We made the deal. And this week, my God, it's war. It's war, Peacock, as we go Game Boy Color versus NEOGEO Pocket Color. It's a one-on-one beatdown here as we discuss these 2 handheld consoles. So, we're going to do this sort of the same way we did the Amiga versus Atari ST. We're going to discuss the various merits and flaws of the systems and come to a conclusion as to which system reigns supreme, or at least figure out what the hell went wrong with one, as we did last time. So, that's the best way to start it off. Now, I want to, before we get into the actual battle, Brent, let's talk a little bit about what was going on when these 2 systems came around. The years...
Well,
go ahead.
Okay. I thought you wanted me to expostulate on why the Game Boy Color exists.
Well, we'll get to that. But I want to talk about the era here, just to give some texture and background of what we're doing. These systems were released in 1998 and 1999, respectively. So right in the late 90s. Yes. And the handheld scene up to that point had been pretty much ran by one group. I mean, there were some contenders, but can we agree on the fact that pretty much the original Game Boy had ran the roost for a good while at this point?
Absolutely.
Now, you had a Game Boy.
Yes.
How do you think the games on that compare to modern games in terms of playability? And I mean, obviously there was no backlight in the original Game Boy, but I mean, did you think it was a fun console?
Oh, absolutely. Because it at the time, now remember, this was pre-cell phone boom. This was, what are you going to do while you drive for 2.5 hours to grandma's? And that's what this did. That's what the handheld generation was really all about. Occupying your time when you had no other way to occupy your time. I mean, some people maybe they can read in the car. Some people get sick when they do that. But gaming was just perfect way to fill the gap, but by distracting you from the boring drives or train rides or bus rides, or just getting a quick game in between classes, or however you want to play them. It was a perfect time for them to come out, and of course they led really into what we almost all play games on today, which is the cell phones.
I can speak on the pre-Game Boy handheld era, and it was obviously mostly not electronic. I remember when I was a kid, when you were in the car, if you weren't playing license plate bingo or whatever, or I Spy, and you were actually trying to play a little handheld unit, you were playing one of these old like an old Tommy game, or one of these things that have water in it, or a marble in a maze. And believe it or not, some of the stuff was fun. And eventually you'd get stuff like a digital derby, like a battery-powered electronic game. But for the most part, most of my childhood was spent playing these little like non-electronic games. So when the Game Boy...
Electronic football was my big thing.
Sure. When that came out, that was awesome. But I remember a time before these handhelds and phones and whatnot, and I can tell you, when we saw the Game Boy come out, it was a revelation when the original Game Boy came out. You'd never see anything like it. And the ability to play what I would consider quality games on the go, like at your fingertips, was awesome. I mean, as a kid, I can imagine it would be the best thing ever that you'd play these things. And you sort of took that unit with warts and all. But in a lot of ways, with the exception of the lack of a backlit screen, which really at the time no one had really, I don't think anybody really thought that was going to happen for a while. They were sort of right. I mean, it came pretty quick, but I mean, it really did rule the roost game wise. I mean, you had a few games, you had the Lynx come out and stuff like that, but they really didn't make much of a dent in the U.S. market, and the Game Boy really did run the roads back in those days.
Well, the Game Boy ran the roads everywhere.
Yeah, it really did.
I mean, it was the absolute. It's the third highest selling video game console ever.
Yeah,
and of course, at its time, nothing could even come close to touch it for the handheld market.
And so that leads us nicely as we go into our discussion here on Game Boy Color versus the NEOGEO Pocket. Brent, if you would, I'm going to let you take the helm here. Why don't you talk a little bit about the introduction to the Game Boy Color and maybe its hardware specifications, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. When you're talking just Game Boy Color, you have to understand why it exists, because just like modern consoles will launch a more powerful version to just give it just a little more oomph at the end of its lifespan. That's what the Game Boy Color was made to do. It was to fill the gap between the original Game Boy and developers hounding Nintendo that they wanted something more powerful and they wanted something in color. And Nintendo was actually working on that in the Game Boy Advance. But developers wanted it right now because the market wanted it. So the Game Boy Color was a step up. It basically was a glorified Game Boy that had a color screen. It took less batteries. It had a little bit longer battery life depending on who you talk to. We're talking 10 to 15 hours on 2 AA batteries. And it had the ability to play the entire back catalog of the original Game Boy. So right out of the gate, you're talking about an absolutely gargantuan library. And while it didn't make those games color in the true sense as of we're going to change the graphics and add shades and stuff like that, it allowed you to tint away from that green monochrome, that kind of ugly Game Boy color or Game Boy screen that was a necessity at the time. It allowed you to tint those colors in the older games, and it did remarkable jobs. Some games you could add that tint, and you got to choose what color tint you added when you started up the Game Boy. To some of those games, if you tint them away from that green and give them, pinks and reds and purples and just, close colors. They look absolutely brilliant. You could almost pass them off as a full color game, even though they're only working with 4 colors. And that's really a testament to the old monochrome Game Boy games, really pushing those 4 colors as far as they could. But the Game Boy Color itself, like I said, it had a slightly faster processor, some more memory, a lot more memory, and the capability to hold more memory on the cartridges. So you could get up to 8 megs on these games, which was fantastic. It's exactly what developers were asking for at the time. Now, in overall talk, when you're talking Nintendo products, the lifespan of the Game Boy was fairly short. It ran from 1998 to 2003, which, I mean, most people would be like 5 years. My goodness, that's perfect. That's a lifetime for some products. But the Game Boy Color was there for 5 years because it needed to be there for 5 years, and they eventually passed the ball off to the Game Boy Advance, which was the plan from the very beginning. So from a hardware perspective, the Game Boy Color did just enough to make developers happy, which is what they wanted, and got some amazing colors on the screen for new games. 115 new games, which we're going to go over some of them later. And the old games, the old total back catalog of games, still playable in the Game Boy Color. So it was really a perfect piece of hardware for the time it came out.
Excellent. So, and I have some thoughts on the Game Boy Color. I'm going to save this until we get into the discussion section. I'm going to talk about, just to enlighten people a little bit on a lesser known system here, which would be the NEOGEO Pocket Color. Now, this was a whole different kettle of fish than what Brent discussed. Of course, the Game Boy Color was coming off of the huge success of the original Game Boy. That the NEOGEO Pocket Color was coming off the moderate success of the NEOGEO Pocket with no color. And this was a machine that was shipped, and at an unfortunate time. It was shipped just right. I think it was right after that the Game Boy Color came out, and so what you had here was a black and white 16-bit system competing with a color 8-bit system, and so Neo Geo saw that they needed to take care of some business, and they took care of it quick, and so that in 1999, March of '99 in Japan, and in August in America, and October in Europe, they released the Neo Geo Pocket Color. Now, I want to fully understand what was going on with SNK and the Neo Geo product line. You've got to look at what was happening to Neo Geo, or to the company in '99. They had gone through a real rough patch, and these, believe it or not, they looked at these handhelds as a way to dig them out of the hole, effectively. And so these things had to be a success. They had no choice. And so, when thinking about them along those lines, they had to build a better product than what their competitors had. They knew that was their only hope, and so and technically, they, from a spec standpoint, they did. This is a Toshiba 16-bit processor instead of the 8-bit on the Game Boy Color. This had more memory. This had a larger display. It could display more colors at once. It also had twice the battery life of the Game Boy Color. It would clock in on get this, Brent, 2 AA's would get you 40 hours of gameplay. That is unheard of. 40 hours is a lot, and that's a confirmed number. So you're getting a lot of gameplay. Now, this also did not have a backlit screen, but it did have a nice TFT screen, just like the Game Boy Color did. And so they knew all this. Nintendo had the luxury of coming off a huge success, and they knew they were bridging a gap before their next system. This was like an all-or-nothing affair for Neo Geo Pocket. I think that's why they loaded the system up so thoroughly, from a spec standpoint. So why did they even get in the ball game aside to make money? They were in this thing because they thought they could capture a decent portion of the market. It was the same dream that the Atari had with the Lynx. They thought a color alternative could take care of business. Now, we both know that the Lynx, one of the major reasons the Lynx fell was the fact it was bulky. It had that battery. The battery life was garbage. So one would think that a superior machine with superior battery life could take care of business. So what you also had in this thing to curb it out, this thing had a second battery slot in it for like a watch battery, and which is a long-lasting battery. And this thing would boot off that watch battery, and even with no cartridge in it, you would get it would turn on and it'd give you some utilities. Something else that the Game Boy Color didn't do. When you booted this thing, you actually, and this is kind of wacky, but you got a pocket menu that had a calendar, a thing that had a world time screen, so you could see what time it was all over the world. It had an alarm clock, which that's a pretty decent idea. I mean, Nintendo had done that back with the Game Watch. And my personal favorite of the pocket menu items, it had a horoscope. So if you wanted to see what your horoscope was for the day, listen, come on, you got to admit that is amusing that they would stick that in there and put a horoscope in the thing. This thing kicked off pretty well, all things considered. It had a little bit of a different layout than the traditional Nintendo face. On the GBA, you had that traditional sort of Game Boy setup with the crosshair controller and the two buttons. This thing went a little bit of different route, whereas Nintendo has the two buttons plus two auxiliary buttons. This had an option button, an A and B button, and a joystick that was completely different than what Nintendo put in theirs. This is another area that NEOGEO Pocket Color really took the extra mile, and this has got one of those clicky micro switch like joysticks, it's like a mushroom style joystick in it. A tremendous joystick. I've never gotten to play any games on the NEOGEO Pocket Color, but I have actually held one and touched it. I was at a computer store that had one, and the joystick on it feels great. The clicky joystick.
Yeah, I've heard high praise for the joystick.
It's I saw a guy take one of these things apart, and the joystick on it had micro switches that could actually be unsoldered and changed out. I mean, they were tiny. I wouldn't want to be the guy that did the solder job.
No one would ever do that. Yeah,
but it still it would be kind of neat to have the ability to do it. So the games. Let's get to the games in terms of the game count. You mentioned that the Game Boy Color had all access to the entire old library of games plus new games. This thing sort of had a similar situation. It could play the Game Boy. It could play Game Boy Color or Game Boy Black and White games.
Wow!
Yeah,
it would win.
Excuse me. It could play NEOGEO Pocket Black and White games. And it could play NEOGEO Pocket Color. That's a mouthful. I'd say that every time. But there weren't a ton of games released for this for the obvious reasons that it didn't do great, to be honest with you. And so and that's what happened. The library's a lot smaller. So if you're looking at which system to pick up now, if you just want a ton of games, then this is probably not the system for you, because if you think about the entirety of the NEOGEO or the Game Boy Color library plus the entirety of the Game Boy library, I mean, how many games were released for the Game Boy? That was probably hundreds and hundreds of games, right, for the original one?
Oh, thousands.
Yeah, and so,
thousands of games. I'm not kidding.
I believe you.
They broke 1,000.
Really? They actually broke 1,000 games? Now, it's funny. I was looking through the library of the Game Boy, and I will say, there's a lot of duds in there, and we'll get into comparing game to game here in a minute. But hardware wise, I think we can both agree that if you consider the fact that this has more memory, a larger screen, arguably a better joystick, and better battery life, and more colors, that this, from a hardware perspective, is clearly the superior machine.
I will give you that it released slightly later and had more updates that from a numbers to numbers comparison, it does have higher numbers. I don't necessarily think the architecture was better. I don't think that necessarily the controls were better. I think they were different. I think they were unique. I think they, for what they attempted to do, it gets high marks, but it's tough to beat a D-pad and 2 buttons that have stood the test of time for decades.
Well, I said arguably with the stick. I should also mention one of the key elements of this thing is the introductory price. This thing shipped at the $69.95 US, $70 US basically. Very cheap. If you consider what year this is, 99. So I mean that's coming in right around the same cost. In fact, it's I think it's the exact same introductory price that the Game Boy Color was at.
Correct.
Both these machines, they have similar features aside from the fact that they both have the 2-button setup. I mean, I will say NEOGEO didn't reinvent the wheel here. They kept it pretty much, instead of having BA, they've got AB, but they pretty much kept the same setup. Yeah, I know. Listen, that's what they did. They both have the like a feature port, that connectability to another handheld. It's funny, one of the other wacky aspects of the Pocket Color, they released this cable that lets you hook this thing up to a Dreamcast. Did you know that?
No, and I don't know why you would ever do that.
Hey, listen, I had to bring this up because it's so wacky. The NEOGEO can hook up to a Dreamcast, and it can play about, let me see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, probably about 10 games in line with the Dreamcast. Pretty weird, and kind of neat though, and mostly from what I've read, it was just you could use, swap over save games and stats, stuff like that. But still, it's a feature, so I'm gonna plug it. I will say the Nintendo did have an infrared, like an infrared port in it, which I don't think got used all that much.
Well, it had a lit cable that you could transfer game saves data and stuff to. It also had the infamous camera and printer setup. If that's your thing,
but not stock. I mean, those were separate.
Those were extras. Yeah.
Both had the headphone jacks. I will say one thing, in the interest of fairness.
Oh, there's no question. NEOGEO looked at what the Game Boy was and said, "We can make that."
Well, I do want to, and like I said, I'm not here to lie, so I'm gonna tell the truth. The sound wise, I think that's one area that the NEOGEO Pocket Color fails in compared to the Game Boy. Both can have digitized speech or samples, but the Game Boy just has. I played a ton of games, and I read about this too. The NEOGEO doesn't have this as good a sound as the Game Boy Color. The Game Boy Color can also play samples over music, and apparently the NEOGEO Pocket Color cannot. And so when you play these, it's a weird thing to play these things, because if you play the Game Boy, the sound, I mean, it's not like a huge difference, but the sound is good, but the graphics aren't as good. And so you're looking at one of them has really good graphics, but the sound's worse. So it's I can't figure out why they would go the extra mile for the screen and the graphics and everything, and then cut costs on the sound. But I think that is one area where they did cut a little of lower than they should have. So,
well, and to be fair, the speaker sound on the Color was incredibly muted. They actually jacked down the max volume, and I think it was more of a, we don't want people jacking this up while they're on the train or on a plane and disturbing others. Of
course, got a headphone jack on it.
If you're playing these things, you've almost certainly got headphones in, or you're alone, so there's no sound around you, or you're a jerk. So the lower speaker volume for me is means nothing, but it's worth mentioning.
So I think from a hardware perspective, and by the way, the sound is also muted on the NEOGEO Pocket Color. I should mention that too. Both these things took a sort of a back step when it comes to the sound. If you listen to it, I will say one thing about a Game Boy, the original Game Boy, it could pop out pretty loud.
Yes, it was tremendously loud.
Apparently,
I mean, I would say easily double.
Apparently, the original Game Boy Pocket was also louder, so they toned it down. And I should mention that there was a very rare sort of new version of the Game Boy Pocket Color that only came out in Japan that also had the sound jacked up. So for whatever reason, this generation they decided to turn the sound down. I don't know why. So with all that said about the hardware, I think that pretty much sums up these things from a hardware perspective. I think, like I said, we could agree that from hardware perspective, the Neo Geo comes out on top just by sheer muscle power. It's a 16-bit system versus an 8-bit system. So
it has higher
there
numbers.
You go.
Yes,
I want to talk.
That's what I'll agree.
So
to.
okay, fair enough. Let's talk about the games. Some of the games this thing. Now, I can't remember. Did you say you did own a Pocket Color at some point?
No, but I had access to one.
Yeah, I've played one as well. So, can you let's talk about the games a little bit with these things, Brent. Go ahead.
Well, like we talked about, I looked it up. The total release library for the original Game Boy was 1,046. So, holy cow, that's a lot of games.
That's for the original Game Boy, not counting the color.
That's for the original Game Boy. Right. Now, that is mind-blowing, right? That's a catalog you'll never get all the way through. Now, are all those winners? Of course not. When you've got over 1,000 games, there's no chance that all of them are going to be great.
I would say, but someone in chat, Dwarven Giant, says 65% shovelware. That's probably a bit low, in my opinion. There was a ton of shovelware.
Absolutely. And, okay, that's perfectly fine. That still leaves you with hundreds of quality games. For the Game Boy Color only games, now these are games that would not work in the original Game Boy. You had to have the updated hardware, and most of them, not all of them, but most of them used that extra hardware to great success. 115 games released, which is pretty tremendous, because you have to remember this was a 5-year span where people were still making original Game Boy games. But these are the developers that were the ones that said, this is what we want. Let's get out here and get some stuff done. Obviously, let's go ahead and talk about the big kicker right out the bat. This thing was made for Pokemon, and it absolutely dominated the sales of any handheld, probably of all time. Pokemon Gold and Silver, which was could be played on the Game Boy Color, you're looking at 23 million units sold. 23 million for a handheld system. Absolutely mind-blowing. Some of the exclusive games that were highly touted, the Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Seasons, and Oracle of Ages was released. Kirby Tilt and Tumble. Now, this, for those that don't know about this game, the cartridge actually had a liquid sensor in it that could tell when you had the game, the system tilted left, right, up, and down. And it was a monkey ball style game, or a Marble Madness style game, where you roll Kirby through these mazes using that sensor to, move it around the maze. A huge precursor to what people play on cell phones now. This was done, way back in the day. And of course, this had a lot of games that came out on other systems. You get your NBA Jams, you've got your all your sports titles. They all look great on the Color. And then you had some amazing games in Bionic Commando came out on the system. Even Neo Geo released some games for the Game Boy Color. So it wasn't like they were abandoning it. They knew the writing was on the wall. They had to stay popular in the market space, and they did so by releasing games for the Game Boy Color. Really standouts that I've personally played, the Mario Golf and Mario Tennis on this are like nothing you've ever seen before from Nintendo. They are sports RPGs, and they are incredibly fun. I had easily 40 hours in Mario Tennis, and the best thing about Mario Tennis is the Mario crew, Mario, Luigi, the princess, all that stuff. They don't even show up until like 3/4 of the way through the game. It is so well paced, and it is so it makes playing tennis. The tennis mechanics are so fun. It's incredible. Unfortunately for me, I could not even begin to review how many of these are good games and how many of these are crap games. I know that when you look at exclusive lists that talk about the top Game Boy Color only games, usually the list is no less than 25 games long. So that means that your general press think that at least 25 of these games are worth mentioning in a top list. That's, a quarter of the games. So developers, since they were calling for this new hardware, they were calling for this more powerful hardware with colors, they really went out there and delivered. And it was also an architecture that they were familiar with coming from the Game Boy. So it really allowed people to put some hugely powerful and beautiful games out.
Very good, very good. I will say I actually played a few of the games you mentioned this week in prep for this, including Mario Golf. And, this, as we mentioned, as we talked about a few minutes ago, there were a ton of games in this that just you'd pass right by. But when they came out with something that was good, it was good. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And most of the stuff that Nintendo produced, the first party stuff, the stuff that had their properties in it, you could usually, much like most of Nintendo's machines, you could hang your hat on them. But there was just a ton of crapiola on here too. So it's a mixed bag.
From the games for sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say all of the color games were winners. I mean, you've got some of these like Hamtaro Ham Unite. That's a hamster-based game.
That sounds pretty good to me.
You've got a few card games, poker-type games. Of course, you're always going to have that on. But you also have, Resident Evil Gaiden. So it's a huge span. I would say most of that it's up by the quality, though.
Very good. So I guess I'll speak on some of the Pocket Color games. So you mentioned that you had access to thousands of games. All right. The total number of games released for the Pocket Color, most of which were done by SNK, was 82. All right. That was 82 games were released. Now, don't worry. We've got all the games released for the NEOGEO Pocket non-color to fall back on. If you picked up one of these systems, you were lucky enough to have 10 games that were released.
I was going to say, I know that library was super small.
So I've got a total of less than 100 games. This is the Achilles heel of this contest. There were less than 100 games available. And keep in mind that just because there were around 98 games released in the States, it's not like they were all released in your area. Quite a few of these were not available in the States or in Europe. Since we've got an international audience, I'm not going to split them up. But you can be sure that probably let's say a quarter of these you wouldn't have access to. So what are the standouts? And one thing you're going to notice when you play this, and I'm just going to be upfront about it, this is a 16-bit system, and I would play this, and then I would go play the Game Boy Color, and there was no contest in terms of the quality of the looks of the games. Like this crushed the Game Boy Color from a visual perspective. We've mentioned that the sound.
Wow, I don't agree.
The sound often was somewhere in the same ballpark, but there were some awesome. I have to say, I played some Game Boy Color games that had some really good sound. I mean, it reminds me. I mean, it's a lot like the original Game Boy, but the having those having sound samples come out at you, it really almost is mind blowing to me. Still, you're just like, wow, these things, they talk and they're cool and they make cool noises. And the Game Boy Color, a lot of times I think part of it's just the fact they had better hardware. They just had better people making the music often, in my opinion. But that's just the opinion thing. But when you actually boiled these down and played them, the graphics on this thing are way, way better. I mean, generally, they're way, way better than the best Game Boy Color games. I tried to get some perspective as to how different these games were, and I tried to go through the systems and play games that were on both systems, and there weren't that many, to be honest with you. But I did play one that I played was Pac-Man. All right, it's a good example. Pac-Man on the Game Boy, you've got Pac-Man, Really, it gives you no options, and you play it, and it's okay, but it's not the best, and it's a scrolling Pac-Man. If you play it on the NEOGEO Pocket, you've got the choice of a scrolling Pac-Man or a like a full screen Pac-Man, so you can play it just like it was in the arcade. It looks better, it's a more attractive package, Now I will say, there's a game, the Pac-Man on the Game Boy Color, it comes with another game, so I assume when they released this, they were like, this isn't enough to sell. They released this thing called I think it's called Pac Attack. It's sort of like Pac-Man meets Tetris. And it's fun. I have to say, did you ever play that?
It's garbage. It's not fun. It's garbage.
I liked it.
It is nonsensical garbage.
Well, I disagree with you on that. Now, I'm talking about this is on your machine.
That game is garbage.
I thought it was pretty good. I had a good time, and the music on it was great.
Don't ever, guys, save yourself the trouble. Don't ever look that up.
No, dude.
It's crap.
Listen, you're being too hard on your own game. I thought it was fun. But anyway, in terms of the actual Pac-Man game, the Pocket Color crushed it. I looked at a lot of fighting games. The Neo Pocket Color has, this is Neo Geo, man. They brought the heat when it came to fighting games. They've got King of Fighters on here. They've got Fatal Fury. They've got Capcom versus SNK on here. They've got Samurai Showdown on here. And the games, it's funny to look at them. The games, they've got
funny, huh? That's how you're going to describe it?
Well, no, when I say that, you can't pack. There are two different approaches to how the fighting games are done. On the Neo Geo Pocket, almost every game would cutify the characters, and make them like it was like fighting children sort of thing. It's funny. I played Street Fighter Alpha on the Game Boy Color to see how that played. It doesn't look nearly as good as the SNK fighters, but and this is the story of a lot of Game Boy Color games. They may not look as good, but they play fine. Like I had a couple rounds of Street Fighter Alpha, and it played real well. The Neo Geo Pocket Color games, they look well and play well. That's the difference. That they, if you're into fighting games, there is no contest. And here you'd want to get the Neo Geo Pocket. That's one thing it has a lot of. Something else that had a lot of, and you may or may not be into, is card games. All right, and I don't just mean. I don't mean poker or a baccarat. It's got those games.
Yeah, fighting collectible.
That's
card
right.
games.
It's got a lot of those on here. And if that's sort of your cup of tea, it's not my cup of tea. I didn't think I was in the card games until I played a bunch of Slay the Spire, and now maybe I am into them because I've been playing a lot of that. Which I believe that was one of the ones you suggested. So it's got a lot of those games. But I mean, I'm looking at the list here. It's got a little bit of everything, but it's not going to have anywhere near as much stuff as the Game Boy Color. You've got your baseball stars, a lot of the stuff that you played on the Neo Geo you can get here. Listen, it's got Turf Masters. I don't know if you've played Turf Masters, but it's good. It's quite good. Now it doesn't have the little girl saying "on the green" stuff like that. There's some missing elements to it, but it plays real well. Do I think it's better than Mario Golf? I liked it more. But I don't know what kind of depth that Mario Golf's got. I'm just talking about as a golf game. I thought it was more fun, but it was, it was what it was.
My problem with Neo Geo Pocket Color games are, though, Aaron? I don't know if it was to shortcut. I don't know if they were going for a style, but they've got so many of their games have that kiddified look, and there's a name for it. Now, I even tried looking it up, but I couldn't find out what it was. I couldn't remember what it was called. But when you take what's supposed to be adults and you squish them down, you give them big heads, and you kidify them, almost like
he just said it's called chibi.
The pop characters. Yeah, that's not for me. I mean, I think if they're doing their own thing and they do that, I can kind of roll with it. But when you have a character that's supposed to look a certain way, and then you do that to them, I hate it, because that's not the way. Just make a new character, just make a new game, make it their own thing. But they stylized so many of their games in this art style. It's a real turnoff for me.
I can understand you. I can understand that. I'm not the biggest fan of chibi either, but it fits. it fits the system size quite nicely. And I will say that the fighting games that do this, they do play well. You know, if you're in a fight now, you're talking 2-button fighting games. But I'm not gonna sit here and kill. I play a couple on the GBC that, and they did, like I said, they didn't look as good, but they also played well. One thing I will not say is that the Game Boy Color does a crappy job playing games, because that's not true. It's got ultimate control, and it's got good games. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So I mean, I think they both have good games. I think they both are good to control. I think they're both quality pieces of kit. But when it comes to the overall look of the games look better. Like, so I've got some, if you're watching at home, I've even got some the black and white stuff mixed in here with the NEOGEO Pocket Color. Even when it's in monochrome, you can see the dramatic difference in what the games look like versus what they look like. It's 8 versus 16-bit. I mean, that's as simple as that. This is more of a next generation system.
I think that's a flawed statement. I don't have anything against the NEOGEO Pocket Color or the black and white version. My biggest issue with the game, like I said, they stylized a lot of that art, and I think they did that to sort of based on time. I think it's quicker to get a game out if you do that. You don't have to push as big a sprite, and I think that allows the games to run at a good clip. Sure, there's good details on the screen. I'm not going to debate that, but I don't think that a majority the Pocket Color games are graphically superior than the majority of Game Boy Color games. I don't agree.
I think if you looked at them, you would listen. There are some. If we talk about the tippity top shelf on both machines, and I can tell you the two tippity top games on my machine. If I was going to pick two to show that I thought showed off the system well, it would be the Metal Slug games and the NEOGEO Pocket Color version of Sonic. Like, they are awesome. I mean, they really are. Sonic it looks very similar to the Genesis version. It's sound wise not as good, but visually and the way it plays, they play great. Sega really went all out when they put that together. And also, you know, I'm not the biggest Metal Slug fan, but it plays great. You know, those are two standout titles, and you couldn't have reproduced those on the Game Boy Color. It just wouldn't. It didn't have the jack. It didn't have the jack.
I don't agree with that. Maybe they wouldn't have been as pronounced, but I certainly think those games are playable on the Game Boy Color.
Fair enough.
I mean, come on now.
No, but I mean, listen. In terms of girth of games, clearly, the Game Boy Color is going to take that for sure. I'm not going to dispute that, but I think. There are plenty of good quality titles on the. I think really most of the titles are quality. When it comes to the
like you said, there's a lot of CCGs.
Well, I mean, if that's your bag, you know, and a lot of those got translated to English as well. So what I'd like to do, Brent, here towards the end, is talk about the ultimate demise of these systems, and I think there's a reason behind it. If you don't mind, if you'll indulge me.
Absolutely. You want me to go first?
Yeah, please.
The Game Boy Color did exactly what it was supposed to do. It was made to make developers happy and bridge the gap before the Game Boy Advance came out. It made developers happy. It made fans happy. It sold incredibly well. Now, Game Boy and Game Boy Color numbers are mushed together for the most part, so it's hard to find numbers on exactly how many Game Boy Colors sold. But most estimates put it in the 6 to 10 million range. That is a tremendous amount of units in 5 years. Also, when it was time to go, it got out of the way and got out and was done. Which brought in for the Game Boy Advanced, which was an incredible handheld, which hopefully we can go over in more depth. I know we've done a review on it once before. But so in my opinion, the Game Boy Color was perfect from beginning to end. I'm not saying all the games were perfect, but its rolling gaming was perfect from beginning to end. It did what it was supposed to do. It sold a bunch of units. It made a lot of money. It had some incredible games for it. And then it was time to bail out. The next guy rolled in, no problem.
Very good. Well, my story is a little more complex than that because so let's talk about why the NEOGEO Pocket floundered. Okay, because it had a lot going for it. We could both agree, right? So
yeah, and it did okay.
It didn't do okay. Your machine sold 6 to 10 million units. Okay, when you hear how many mine sold, it didn't do okay. So this released in the States. They had a cutting plan, Brent. And their cutting plan was to only release this via the internet.
Yeah.
They debuted this.
I don't think that was a plan. I think that was a oh crap, we can't do an actual release on this.
I mean, they could. They just didn't. So they sold this thing through an outfit called E-Toys in 1999, okay? They also promised they would have 20 games by the end of that year, and they launched with 6 titles, which was probably not enough. And eventually, they finally managed to get these things in Walmarts and Best Buys and Toys R Us and whatnot. But it took a while. Everything took a while to unwind. It also took a while for them to get advertising. They eventually had an advertising push, but it took them a while. So when this thing launched, and you had not that many units went out. I mean, you had it was estimated between 10 and 25,000 units were sold at launch. That's not that many.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And then ultimately, I believe it was the final numbers on this thing were somewhere like 100,000 units in Japan, and maybe 25,000 units in Japan, 100,000 in Europe. They did better in Europe, but I mean, so those numbers are pitiful units.
Yeah.
Now, what was going on behind the scenes? Well, here's what was going on. SNK went broke, and their stuff was bought by an outfit called Aruse. All right, and so Aruse had a plan. They're the ones that got this crap. They helped get this stuff more available, but ultimately, after by May of 2000. The NEOGEO Pocket Color had managed to take 2% of the market in the U.S. 2%. Let me tell you who had the majority of that. It wasn't the Lynx. I can tell you that right now. It was the Game Boy Color. It was stomping the crap out of them. This was a stat I did find interesting. They had captured 2% from the Game Boy to Game Boy Color, but it was still enough for SNK United States to turn a profit. That's amazing.
Yeah.
On 2%. But unfortunately, SNK's bigger than just the United States. There's that whole rest of the world aspect where they were taking a bath. So Aruse decided to give up on this thing in June of 2000. So this thing's lifespan was pitiful. It was around. Think about it. It released in the North America in August 6th of 99, and by June 13th, they slammed the door on this thing. Okay, it was gone. They also decided to take all the unsold units they had and send them back to Japan to try to sell over there. And so that was it. In Japan they ended up running until 2001, so a few more months. I say months because you're talking 7-8 months, and then they're done, all worldwide. So this thing in its entirety, being generous, you could say it had a 2-year lifespan in some parts of the world, but for the most part, it had a lifespan that was less than a year. Okay, and a big chunk of that, I think, can be chalked up. Well, I think the biggest chunk of the failure can be chalked up to the fact that they ran headlong into a juggernaut. I mean, Game Boy.
Yeah, you can't take on the king.
Yeah, even if you've got a superior, this shows you that a superior product, in the face of the big dog, can't get it done. This is sort of a reverse of our Atari ST versus Amiga. For the Atari ST, I mean, it did great until it ran headlong into something that had better specs, and then it lost. This is the exact opposite of that. This had better specs, and it ran headlong into something that was worse and got murdered. It's a very strange circumstance. The funny, wacky thing about this is SNK, when they sold to Aruse, they didn't like how they were handling their products, and so eventually they went and they basically reformed SNK, and then they went back and bought all their assets from. That's weird. I don't know how that happens in business. It struck me as really strange way to go out. But so I guess that's why that stuff's sort of still around today. This was the last proper console that SNK released. Now you could go into arguments about some of the more recent, things that have came out.
Yeah,
but the company formally went bankrupt August 22nd, 2001. That was the end of that, and so that's the end of your of any production on the Neo Geo Pocket. I should say, just because I looked it up. I looked up the eBay on this to see what they were going for, and I don't know if you did the same thing. These things actually they go for way more money. Of course, they're probably way more rare. They definitely are than the Game Boy Color. These things were, if you get one from Japan, you can get it. You can maybe get one for under $100 if you're lucky. If you're trying to get one in the States, you're going to be up in the $150 to $200 range to get one of these. One thing else I read that I thought was interesting, so I'd include it in this conversation. Remember when they sent all the Neo Geo Pocket Colors back to Japan to sell? They didn't send them all, because at some point in the 2000s, someone, I guess, found a bunch of these and put them in blister packs and sold them in the States with like a couple games that weren't released here. So they were for a song too. And I remember hearing about people that picked these things up at their local stores. And so if you were real lucky in the early 2000s, you could have came across one of these. The games had no manuals or anything. They were just games in a blister pack with the Neo Geo Pocket Color. Probably they were assuming that when you bought those were probably the only games you would ever get with it. Because where are you going to get those?
Yeah.
On a personal note, I know that they actually sold these things at Target, because I remember one time I was at a Target. This was years ago. And I bought, on Super Duper Cutout, I bought Pac-Man for the Neo Geo Pocket Color. I didn't have a Neo Geo Pocket Color, but I was stunned when I came across in the store. It was like $2. And I sold it on eBay. I think I got like $25 out of it. That's why I bought it. So I did, in fact, own one Neo Geo Pocket Color game in my lifetime. So I thought that was kind of neat.
No system, one game.
Yeah.
Got it.
One thing that was mentioned a lot, I saw this a lot online, is that in Japan, the Neo Geo Pocket Color, this is something else I hear the hardcores talking about, that in Japan, they release these things with these really awesome cases, for the games. In America, it was just a cardboard. That's all you ripped it open. So that's something else they didn't do to ingratiate themselves. But it was a cost-cutting measure, So there you go. I mean, do you have any final thoughts on this? I mean, ultimately,
just one thing to mention, since we're talking about it's kind of eBay sales and after the fact. I pulled it up real quick, and I'm looking here at two listings. Nintendo Game Boy Color handheld console, Atomic Purple with Tetris game, because of course the Game Boy Color launched with 5 different colors, and then they had dozens more in special promotion, all that stuff. So the system and the game, $25.
Wow.
Okay. The next listing down, Nintendo Game Boy Color Atomic Purple, so same color, new mint factory sealed, $2,800.
That doesn't surprise me a bit. Because it's mint in the box. What are you gonna do? We didn't touch on this, although your background sort of does. But this was the classic Wonder Swan effect, where they had multitudes of colors for these things when they came out. They loved this. I always wonder how this affects overall cost when you do this. Mine shipped originally with 6 colors: blue, black, white, a platinum blue, silver, and a stone blue. 3 different blues in there. And I'm sure, and I know the Game Boy had 1 million colors. I remember their ad campaign.
It launched with 5. Yeah.
That always strikes me as goofy.
Well, I don't know about the Pocket Color, but the Game Boy Color, it's literally just shells.
Yeah.
And you can actually mix and match. If you had 2 Game Boys, you could take the back off of one and put it with the front of another one, line it up, click it in, screw it up. And we didn't go into this because it doesn't really fit into the theme of the show. But the Game Boy Color, highly moddable. I'm not talking hack. I'm talking you can easily switch out buttons, D-pads, shells. You can add a light to it, so it is a backlit screen. You can change out the speakers. All of it very, very friendly. Not that Nintendo endorsed it, but very, very friendly system to do that kind of thing too.
Yeah. Like I said, I saw somebody open up one of the Neo Geos, and it also looks like I don't know about. I know they make a backlit screen for it, just like they do Game Boy, that you can replace. It's really easy to get into. So I'd say both systems were right for that. So I'll tell you, if I had one of these things, I would absolutely get the backlit screen. That was one of my big problems with all these machines, and you know this from having that Game Boy Advance. It's just hard to play them. If you're on the bus, something that's real bright. I mean, you're pretty much, it's either too bright or not bright enough. You had to have a sweet spot.
Yeah.
Just to close off one, and I think we can. It's funny, as in a versus episode, I knew right away who was going to win this thing. I mean, spiritually, but you've got the machine with all the superior like bits, plus basically superior looking games, but it got smashed. To show you how unsuccessful the Neo Geo Pocket Color was, it was outsold in Japan by the Wonder Swan. It got crushed. And we talked about the fate of the Wonder Swan a while back, so it had no chance, unfortunately. But still, it's a fascinating little handheld.
I wouldn't mind owning
either.
One. I don't know what I'd play on it, but I wouldn't mind owning one.
If you had a multi-card and all the games, I mean, if just for fighting games, it would be fun to have, you know.
I'm
not going to lie to you. Having played fighting games on both machines, all right, and again, the Game Boy Color, not as attractive, but the fighting games are not bad at all. I mean, for a handheld, they're darn good, you know. So I'll give credit where credit's due. You know, I think we can call this a draw. That's what I'm calling it. Anyway.
It's a draw as long as you don't look at any of the facts.
Screw it. Let's go to the wheel. All right. Brent, we've added some new goodies this week.
Yes.
You know, we got all those suggestions from a couple weeks ago, and you've already turned them into pie pieces. Good on you. We've added a suggestion from our good buddy who actually rated us, Rob Flock O'Hara, who suggested Robot Madness. It's madness, but with robots. And our new classic piece, this will be retro rewind piece, the Commodore 16. We're gonna get back into that if we roll that one. So
all right,
here we go. Let me get this sucker in line here. Here we go. All right, you ready? You have any thoughts on this one, Brent?
Let's do it. Something good. They're all good or bad, really.
They're not all good. I can tell you that right now. And the winner is Games with Birds. It's Games with Birds. There you go.
Now, Aaron, we have to talk about something very important.
Hold on a second.
How to get entered into the Dragon's Lair Mini giveaway.
All right, get into it. You jumped the gun on me, but go ahead. I'm ready for it.
Here's what we're going to do, Aaron. We are going to commit to pick a game by Monday.
Okay.
Okay? We're going to announce what we have chosen on Twitter, on YouTube, in the comment section of this video, on Discord, all the ways to get that out there. So, if you send us a review of the games that we're playing, it doesn't have to be super detailed, can just be a paragraph, 5 or 6 sentences of a review of each of the games we are playing. We will take up to 3. And we don't normally game reviews, we only get 1 or 2. So I'm not saying you're guaranteed if you send us a review that you're going to find yourself a place on the wheel, but we got 3 possibilities going up. We're going to pick 3 names from the people we get reviews from, and you can send those reviews to our email address, argpresents@mail.com. Just put game review in the subject. You can submit those on Discord. And you can even submit them on Twitter as long as, it's a link going to somewhere that your review is posted, because we want more than 270 characters or 240 characters, whatever Twitter limit is. But we have options for you. Get your reviews in for the games we pick, and Maybe you can win yourself a Dragon's Lair mini.
Well said. Listen, we'd like to thank everyone in the chat. We had a good crowd in here today, Brent. We appreciate you guys for turning up and checking us out. We will be back next week. By the way, this piece was suggested by me. This is one of the ones that came from the Thanks for Giving from 2 years ago. And this is one of mine, so I'm looking forward to it. Hey, you just put a good games with birds in the mix. So next week, games with birds. Get your reviews in, and we will catch you guys again next week. Until then, SNK forever.
Thanks for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. Hello to our YouTube subscribers and our Twitch followers. A special thank you to Duncan Styles for our vector graphics and Bartbit for an amazing closing theme. Want to help keep ARG spinning for as little as $1 a month? You can do so at our new Patreon at patreon.com/ARG Presents. Just like these fine folks. Graham W. Vetke, Rollo, Olaf Hope, Anthony Jarvis, Terry Howard, Gary Heather, John Schaller, The Slow Norris, Frodo NL, Steve Rasmussen, Bernhard Lucas, Chris Folds, Mitsuyama, Jason Warnes, Rob Black O'Hara, Andy Craig, Dave Velociraptor, Retroalgy, Hermsky, Rauschy, John Dykeman, Jerry Dennington, Z9K9, and Mr. B. Don't want to explain another credit card bill? That's okay too. You can help us out by leaving us a positive review on Spotify or Apple iTunes. Have an idea for a wheel piece? Email it to us at argpresents@mail.com. We film live every Sunday, 10 a.m. EDT on Twitch. Hope to see you there.